Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we're going to discuss a way to build the core of a commander deck around Umbris Fear Manifest as its general. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There, you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things magic. Umbris Fear Manifest is a 1/1 legendary nightmare horror that gets +1/+1 for each card our opponents own in exile. Whenever Umbris or another nightmare or horror enters the battlefield under our control, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a land card. Our formula here is simple. We're going to exile our opponent's cards and make Umbris a threat through lethal commander damage. We want each of our opponents to contribute to this dynamic while leaving our own cards and resources intact. So, let's begin building the core of this deck with spells and effects that exile each opponent's cards. Tasha's Hideous Laughter exiles cards from the top of each opponent's library until each of those players exiles cards with a total mana value of 20 or more. In a 4-player game, this spell easily could make Umbris at least a 21/21 when it enters our side of the battlefield. Ashiok Nightmare Muse creates nightmare creature tokens that can trigger Umbris's exile ability when they enter the battlefield. They also force each opponent to exile the top 2 cards of their library whenever one of these nightmare creature tokens attacks or blocks. Ashiok Dream Render mills target player for 4 cards and then exiles each opponent's graveyard. Ashiok punishes our opponents by denying them access to search their libraries secondary to any spells or effects they control, in addition to the milling and exiling features. Sire of Stagnation further punishes our opponents by partaking in a basic fundamental of the game, playing lands. This dynamic synergizes with the strategy of this build and rewards us with card draw. Curse of the Swine exiles our opponent's creatures and replaces them with a Sounder of Swine. Rod of Absorption exiles instant and sorcery spells as they resolve, and has an ability that can be used to cast spells from among those exiled cards without paying their mana costs. Targeting our opponent's graveyards for exile is a great way to speed up our Umbris game plan. Douthie Voidwalker exiles cards with void counters on them whenever they enter an opponent's graveyard. It also provides us with the benefit of playing one of these cards without paying its mana cost. Leyline of the Void does the same, but without void counters or an ability to play any of the exiled cards. It has the added benefit of being an enchantment, which usually is more difficult to remove from play. It also has a put into play for free effect if it's in our opening hand. Author of Shadows exiles all cards from all opponents' graveyards with its Enter the Battlefield trigger. It also provides us the benefit of casting a non-land card exiled this way and spending mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. At instant speed, Zot's Will exiles all cards from our opponent's graveyards as well. It also gifts us with 0/1 Black Thrall creature tokens equal to the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. Soul Guide Lantern exiles each opponent's graveyard and also provides spot exiling when it enters the battlefield. Since we're going to target our opponent's graveyards, let's fill them with some robust milling spells and effects. Fractured Sanity mills each opponent for 14 cards. In a standard 4-player EDH game, Umbris gets a staggering +42/+42 from this 3-mana spell. Maddening Cacophony mills each opponent for 8 cards. However, if we pay the kicker cost, then each opponent mills half of their library rounded up instead. Mind Grind has each opponent reveal cards from the top of their library until X land cards are revealed, and then they put all cards revealed this way into their graveyards. If we can hold on to the Monarch, then Court of Cunning mills each opponent for 10 cards at the beginning of our upkeep. In order to exploit another basic fundamental part of the game, drawing cards, we add Psychic Corrosion. Whenever we draw a card, each opponent mills 2 cards. Speaking about fundamental parts of the game, Ruin Crab mills each opponent 3 cards whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control. Altar of the Brood extends this exploitation of fundamentals by milling each opponent 1 card whenever another permanent enters our side of the battlefield. When Umbris enters the battlefield, we want to start picking off opponents one by one, but our general is vulnerable to removal and does not have any evasion. Let's check both of those boxes by adding Whisper Silk Cloak. Umbris gets protection in the form of Shroud and evasion in the form of unblockability. Extending our plan to one-shot our opponents, let's add Trailblazer's Boots for non-basic landwalk, because everyone plays with non-basic lands. Everyone. As long as our opponents do not control any walls or changelings, Prowler's Helm makes Umbris unblockable as well. Either of these equipment, in conjunction with Swiftfoot Boots, should cause many headaches for our opponents and many victories for us. Speaking of unblockable, Rogue's Passage can provide that to Umbris. Another equipment to consider is Shadow Spear. It provides evasion in the form of trample, the bonus of life gain, as well as a kill switch for our opponent's hexproof and indestructible permanents. By paying 3 life, Hall of the Bandit Lord can give our general haste. Earlier, we prioritized spells and effects that affect each opponent. However, some single opponent targets can be useful too. Nemesis of Reason has a robust toughness and should survive combat. Each time it attacks, defending player mills the top 10 cards of their library. Although his mana value is intensive in a Dimir deck, Ulamog's Ceaseless Hunger exiles 2 target permanents when we cast him. Ulamog also exiles the top 20 cards of defending player's library whenever he attacks. Mind Funeral has a mind grind-like effect of forcing an opponent to reveal cards from the top of their library until they reveal 4 land cards. They then put all cards revealed this way into their graveyard. Traumatize mills half of an opponent's library, rounded down, and as targeted milling goes, few options can be more potent than Altar of Dementia in an Umbris build. Without any automatic shuffle into library effects, we should be able to mill an opponent easily with our general. We threaten our opponents with lethal commander damage whenever Umbris is on our side of the battlefield. When in play, let's not forget about our general's exile trigger. Zealoc's Zanity Flayer is a horror that creates 1/1 horror creature tokens whenever a player mills 1 or more creature cards. It also has a built-in targeted mill ability. Zealoc's and the horror creature tokens it creates trigger Umbris. Grell Philosopher also is a horror and has an ability that allows it and each horror we control to gain the activated ability of target artifact an opponent controls. Soul Rings for days, baby. Although its mana investment is high in a Dimir build, Brainstealer Dragon is a horror, has a repeatable exile effect, allows us to cast the exile cards, and whenever a non-land permanent owned by an opponent enters the battlefield under our control, they lose life equal to its mana value. In the long game, this could be considered another potential win condition in this type of build. If another creature dies, Voidmaw exiles it instead. We can put a card exiled with Voidmaw into its owner's graveyard to give this Trampoly Horror +2/+2 until end of turn. Let's complete the core of this build by optimizing and enhancing the deck's exile theme. Captaining Gothrad is on flavor as being a horror, gives our horrors evasion, milling abilities, and artifact and creature recursion. With enough instant and sorcery spells, Thing in the Ice has the ability to bounce all non-horror creatures back to their owner's hands when it transforms into Awoken Horror. Intellect Devourer also is on theme and exiles a card from each opponent's hand when it enters the battlefield. These cards are exiled for as long as Intellect Devourer is on our side of the battlefield, but we can play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled by this horror, and we may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to do so. Generally, targeted exile removal should be prioritized, particularly in a build like this. Reality Shift exiles a creature, and Resculpt exiles an artifact or creature. Protecting Umbris is paramount to our strategy, so Fierce Guardianship is an auto-include because it's free to cast when our general is on our side of the battlefield. Pact of Negation could be game-saving, just don't forget to pay its upkeep cost. Swan Song is a cheap counterspell that can protect Umbris, just like an offer you can't refuse. The spell's controller is gifted with either a 2/2 bird creature token or a couple of treasure tokens, neither of which are concerning to us. Since this deck's theme fits it, let's include the following alternate win condition. At the beginning of each end step, Bloodchief Ascension will get a quest counter whenever an opponent loses 2 or more life. When it has at least 3 quest counters on it, whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, that player loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. With an online Bloodchief Ascension, Mindcrank can finish the game. When an opponent loses life, they mill that many cards from Mindcrank. Each milled card triggers Bloodchief Ascension and drains that opponent for 2 life, and we gain 2 life. This loss of life from Bloodchief Ascension triggers Mindcrank, and the opponent mills that many cards again. The opposite is doable as well. If we mill an opponent, then that will trigger Bloodchief Ascension, which then triggers Mindcrank. Rinse, lather, repeat. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of a commander deck around Umbris Fear Manifest as its general. Removal spells, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on the metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for taking advantage of Umbris's Exile synergy, in addition to providing ways to optimize this theme. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.